as a solo artist, I have felt that the one thing that we have, because it's very easy, especially with the glut of artists out there right now, it's very easy to think that you hear other people and you think, oh, I could never do that. They're so much better than I am, or they have this great success with songs, and you think you're going to have that. The one thing that we have over everyone else is that we are us. We are unique, and that's the one thing that I can always hang on to. That I will create something that is uniquely me. So I have had this sense that perhaps if I were to be writing with other people, that I would water that down somehow.
Welcome to the Vocal Lab. I'm Sarah Ramsey, and this show aims to pull back the curtain on the entertainment industry, where veterans give up-and-coming artists some of the information they wish they'd had when they were just starting out. Sort of a music industry primer, if you will. Thanks for joining us on the Vocal Lab. This is actually part 2 of our interview, so if you haven't caught part 1 yet, head back to the episode right before this one and get all caught up, and then join us back here. We'll see you soon. Do you want to talk a little bit about the songwriting piece of things? You've done a lot of work with Songwriters Association of Canada, hosted Bluebird North for 28 years. You've taught songwriting workshops. I can't imagine a better person to talk about songwriting. So what do up-and-coming artists need to understand about the life of a song, both the creative and maybe the mechanical too, but from writing or co-writing, registering, licensing, onward, all the
Whoa,
things.
That's a big subject.
I know it is.
Okay.
And you don't have to go, crazy deep on it, but
I'll start with some of my basic feelings about songwriting. Mm-hmm. We talk about verses and choruses and bridges and the structure of things. And the structure is there because human beings do like patterns. They respond really well to patterns. And that's certainly true in music, where you have an innate sense. You don't think of it logically as a listener, but where you're ready for it to rhyme, right? Mm-hmm. And when it does, there's something so satisfying about it. So I love the puzzle of that I find that words have their own musicality to them. So, most people have heard the scrambled egg story about Yesterday, the song Yesterday, that first the word was scrambled eggs because it had the right feel to it. But then obviously I had to find a better word for that. Because they have a rhythm to them. They have the shape of them has a musicality to them and how they're sung. So often when I'm starting a song, I will sing nonsense words that have the right shape, or just words that are real words, but they don't make any sense. And then eventually they start to find their way to the right word that starts to tell me what the song is about. And then it's more of a craftsmanship of serving the pattern, serving the rhyming scheme, and finding the right words that will both tell the story, have the musicality, and rhyme where they need to rhyme. Mm-hmm. According to me, it's not like it's a rule. It's just like a psychological, emotional thing that really satisfies us. But I still believe it to be, as the listener and also as the writer, it's a linear journey. But as you're listening to a song for the first time, you don't know where it's going to go. But as long as I never drop the listener, as long as, at least that's my goal, is to cast a spell from the very beginning and never break that spell till the end of the song. And I don't know if that's helpful, but to pass on to other people, but it's certainly what I think is the reality of how it works.
I think it's very helpful.
And then there's things like I've never written a sad song and used the word pain or sorrow, or like it's a show don't tell, like creating a scene or a scenario like you would in a film, where you don't know what's happening or what you're supposed to feel yet, but there's hints of it in how things look and what is being described. There's hints of what the mood is and what might be coming. And then that allows the person to go there and feel the thing that you're leading them to feel, instead of telling them, this is what you're supposed to feel from this. When I went to LA in the mid 80s to write for publishers, and that's when I learned that there's a big difference between writing for yourself as an artist and writing for publishers, because they always say the singer is not going to want to put themselves in a bad light. So if you're writing a very self-deprecating song, nobody else is going to want to cover it. And it's questionable whether other people are going to want to hear it too, because again, it circles around to that might make them uncomfortable. I don't want to make them uncomfortable. There are other artists who that's their goal, that they want to shake people up, and they want to be on the edge, and they want to be edgy, and that's great. So I'm really just speaking from my own sensibilities, and in terms of the business end, this is where I am going to be useless for you, because I'm not completely useless, but obviously I register all my songs with SOCAN. I have not pursued actively enough getting placements for those songs. In the last 10 years, there's been so many new organizations that have rights organizations in various ways that have popped up, and I am overwhelmed by it. And every week I think I'm going to find somebody who will sort this out for me and help me get these songs registered in all the places that they should be registered. Because it is important. And the people that I know who are really good at it, even when it comes to Spotify playlists, etc., they do really well. And as a matter of fact, you might want to have Helen Austin from the Big Little Lions. She's one of my favorite. It's a duo, and she lives on Vancouver Island, and he lives in Ohio. And they have had this very successful duo where they're only together when they're touring. So all their whole creative life is done long distance. And he does all the production and recording she records her parts. And anyway, very fascinating. But she's very proactive and very savvy about all of this stuff. And she's very inspiring in that way, and never misses an opportunity, but is also just a lovely person and fantastic songwriter. I love her songwriting. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
yeah, I will definitely check that out.
Who get it. There are people who know how to do it. And so that would be, winding back to your first question, what would I have done differently? I would have been more on top of that.
Okay.
As much as I have thought along the way that I was doing all the right things, so much more is required now. And of course, that's going against the fact that I'm 71 years old, and I don't really want to work at all that stuff. Like, I'd rather really enjoy this last few decades, she says, and not spend so much time with administration, which is so much of what a solo artist does anyway. Self-managed.
You did talk there about the difference between writing for yourself as an artist versus writing for a publisher. Is there a difference that you can speak to between solo writing and co-writing? Or is that a thing that you like?
Well,
there are obviously different processes, but
only in the context of my reticence to be a co-writer, which is really not something I am proud of. And it's one of those things that has on the list of things that scare me that I haven't said an unqualified yes to. And it's partly because, I have no good excuse for it. Like, it very well could be that if I had opened up myself to that all the way along, that I could be way more successful than I am as a songwriter. That's quite possible.
Yeah, what it could have, who knows?
It's possible. But as a solo artist, I have felt that the one thing that we have, because it's very easy, especially with the glut of artists out there right now, it's very easy to think that you hear other people and you think, oh, I could never do that. They're so much better than I am, or they have this great success with songs, and you think you're going to have that. The one thing that we have over everyone else is that we are us. We are unique, and that's the one thing that I can always hang on to, that I will create something that is uniquely me. So I have had this sense that perhaps if I were to be writing with other people, that I would water that down somehow.
So I'm going to take from that then, if co-writing isn't your favorite, that the trio things like UHF and things like that you guys all came together with your own solo written songs as opposed to writing together and then just performed them all together. Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. We've always done a lot of arranging together, which is a very fun part of it. But no, we have not co-written.
Okay.
Yeah. And as I said, it's not something I'm the least bit proud of. I feel like I'm a wuss, but it hasn't been, well, I guess there's been the odd offer, but always like hypothetically, not like, here we are with our instruments, let's co-write. I don't think I would say no in that situation. I did a little bit with Bruce Miller. I'm just remembering this. A little bit with Bruce Miller. I find the creative process is a little scary to me. And so to do that in front of and with someone else, but I have a feeling that it all depends on who it is. And if it were the right person, I mean, I'm so comfortable with so many of my peers. And I do find it's easy to get comfortable with people. So it probably wouldn't be a problem. I'm just going against everything I said about things.
You're talking yourself into a co-write situation. But I think that I understand what you're saying, that the process of creativity is actually can be a very vulnerable one. And so to open yourself up to do that in the presence of anybody else, I understand the hesitancy there, because it's a very vulnerable situation. So it's not, some people get very good at doing it and it becomes very, I don't know, business-like to do it. It's just, well, and for some people that is what they do. They just professionally co-write for publishers
like
and that kind of thing.
Else. Yeah.
Right. But I think for people who primarily write for themselves, that is a different kind of vulnerability, because we're typically writing our own stories. So opening that up to participate with somebody else, that has to be the really right situation.
You just triggered another songwriting story in that, and there's been a few of the workshops that I've done where there will be somebody who presents a song and you're not really sure what it's about or what they're trying to say. And we'll say, so what is it song about and what are you trying to say? And they'll tell this incredible story with many layers and depth and, again, vulnerability. And you say, write that. That's the song to write. That there can be a sense of thinking that it has to be very obscure so that you're not really saying what the experience was that you're writing from. Yeah.
Well, I think people don't necessarily, from an audience point of view, I think people don't necessarily understand that writers are, depending how they write, basically singing their diary to you, right? Like they're opening up and singing to you about their potentially most vulnerable moments, the hardest pieces of their lives, sometimes also the most joyful and other things as well. But a lot of what we end up writing about is the hard stuff. And sometimes it can feel too vulnerable to just simply say that outright. Sometimes it feels a little safer to cloak that in some metaphor. So it's not quite
it
so
needs
much.
to be cloaked. It does need to be cloaked, but sometimes it's easy to go too far so that the person doesn't know what you're saying and therefore can't feel something from what you're writing.
Yeah. So how do you approach the concept of storytelling in your writing? Around connecting to your audience and storytelling?
Yeah. I don't have a particular way of doing it, I don't think, but I try and walk that line. Um, for those, I think my favorite example of this is a song called "A Bit of Forgiveness," which is on my last album, and it's about coming together with someone that you have been apart from for a long time, and figuring out what happened and how you got there. So there's nothing about that conversation except in the very last verse where I say, "I'm so glad that you called after all of the pride after the fall. We found our way through the trees." Anyway, so it winds it up that way. But the rest are images. We took a trip to the edge. We could see all the pieces. No, sorry, I can never recite lyrics. They'll just have to go listen to the song. But I try and find that sweet spot where I'm portraying a scene to allow, as I said before, to allow the person to sort of go there too, and then to start to feel what it is that you are describing without very specifically describing it. It's hard, I've never tried to articulate how to describe what that sweet spot is, but it exists. I do collect phrases, interesting phrases and words that I like the sound of them or the meaning of them that I think would fit in a song. I'm kind of digressing here, but the other thing other tool that I tell people is to make sure that they preserve the natural shape of the language. So a phrase and a word has the accent where we would normally have it and say it. It's a small thing, but it's just one of the things that allows it to flow. Because again, I think of it as a spell that we're casting, and we're on this journey with the song and the story. And you don't necessarily want to be so prescriptive and descriptive that you're saying exactly what you want them to see and feel. So walking that line where you're creating images and words that imply emotions and let them apply it to their own story. But I don't know how to describe doing that.
That's fair. That's fair. But I think that the piece around syntax is important. I talk to students about that actually fairly regularly. If they bring in a song that they've been working on, and when you put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, it does. I always say, how would you speak it? Because if you're emphasizing the wrong thing, it takes you out of the magic of the story that you're in. It's that, it's like in a movie, we call it this, or a book or whatever, you call it the suspension of disbelief, right? And as soon as you put the emphasis in the wrong place, or you cut the phrase in the wrong way, and it takes it out of the natural speech patterns, it takes you out of that magic of being in the story.
Right. Which is what I always have been saying is you break the spell that you've cast. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we're talking about storytelling, I have to ask, the song Bad, Bad Girl, is that about your relationship with the music industry?
No, it's my relationship with creativity.
Okay.
And it's funny because I was so green. That was perhaps my second song or third song that I'd written. And it was only years later that I realized that, of course, it would be taken as a naughty girl kind of thing, right? And that, in fact, what I was saying is that you carry those voices from. I didn't articulate it that way at the time, even to myself, but in analyzing it after, it was about the childhood voice that says you're not working hard enough, or so it was about feeling that I had this success, and that I needed to be that it would be very easy to just enjoy life. And oh God, I have to think of the lyrics now. Every day it's the same dance, I barter with freedom and time. I give up duty for
I
one
give
more
up
chance
duty
to
for
make
one more
that
chance
freedom
to make
mine.
that freedom mine.
Oh yeah, I should ask you. You'd remember. I know it looks so easy. Everything has its price. Yeah, feeling like I was getting this, it was sort of an easy ride, but that I could not have it without buckling down and doing the hard creative work, and my tendency to avoid that hard creative work.
Uh-huh.
There you go again, shaking your finger, trying to make me face this lingering feeling I've got. Yeah, that sort of because we're so hard on ourselves all the time. I mean, I was kind of ahead of my time with the self-talk. Trying to talk about the downfall of the self-talk and the negative self-talk.
Well, and I think as creative people, it's not unlike like people who are entrepreneurs, actually, as opposed to going in and working a 9-to-5 job. That's what I'm talking about, where the work is never done. There's always something to be done. There's always that feeling of like something on your shoulder that needs to be done that's not complete yet. I think when you are a creative person, it always feels like you should be doing more. You're not finished yet. You're not working hard enough. You're not whatever. When you're an entrepreneur, It always feels like there's more work to do. You haven't gotten enough done. You don't get to clock out at the end of the day. There's parallels there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's sort of the curse of it all, but it's also the fact that we are so fortunate to have lives that we are directing ourselves, and that get to have so much creativity and so much reward and interactions with others and all of that stuff. So there's always a sense of, do I deserve this? This has been a fantastic life. And I was feeling that even in the beginning, even 4 or 5 years in, feeling like, wow, I know this looks like it's just a great ride that I'm on, but I know that that I have to work really hard.
So earlier in your career, like your first few records were certainly the production part of it. Honestly, I think your songwriting can sit in either kind of production throughout, but the production in the earlier part of your career was more like pop kind of production. And through your career, it has shifted into more of the folk spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Over the course of time. Do you want to talk about that transition and sort of what drove that change?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the beginning, with the first 3 albums, there were major label deals, and so Claire Lawrence, my producer, knew that he had to try and walk that line of honoring me as an artist, which I was just figuring out what that was and who I was, and giving the record company something that they wanted, something that they would feel was going to make that they could get radio play and make the money. So that it was the times. I mean, it was the 80s. So there was, or late 70s, early 80s. So that was the kind of, there was so much less leeway as to what was put out into the world, because you couldn't record an album without a record deal. Nobody did. And so you were very tied to what the record label thought would make money. I didn't feel I was compromising myself as an artist necessarily, because I didn't know who I was yet as an artist. And fortunately, because Claire was so wise and intuitive, I would write songs like Oh Daddy, or maybe even She Remembers, but definitely Oh Daddy, or I'm Not the One. They were songs that I just wrote on the side while I was writing for the record, that just came out. And Claire was wise enough. Oh Daddy was a perfect example. Wise enough to know that those were my real song. Those were who I was as an artist. And he did not question that they were going to go on the album. And so that really set me on a course of realizing that I needed to honor that part of me as a writer. So when I didn't have a record deal anymore and I was on my own, I didn't have to take that into consideration, like what was going to make the record company happy that they could sell well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew I wanted it to be successful and be played, but and then along the way, one of those albums I produced all on my own. Claire produced me for several of them. And even when I was doing on my own, he would sort of co-produce and be a great advisor still to this day. So, and that has just continued on. The more I've been comfortable with having my own ideas and realizing them in terms of production, the more organic they've become. But of course, the times have changed too, and so many things. I mean, there's lots of extremes, of course, in production and styles of music, but in singer-songwriter styles of music and the kind of shows that I do live, having it more stripped down. Although, have you heard Back to Shore yet? The most recent one?
No, but
okay,
that is on my. Okay, yeah, it's on my.
So there's a couple on there that are rockier.
Okay.
And those aren't the ones that I end up playing live or that end up being requested. It's usually the more heartfelt ones. I mean, I always feel like I should have balance on a recording of some uptunes, but not having an whole album of ballads. But they don't come as easily to me, and I don't know how to make them as deep, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand.
So that transition was definitely purely because of going from having a major label deal to being an independent.
Yeah. And let's talk about the realities of life on tour, because you've spent a lifetime on tour, right?
Yes, I have.
Yes, you have. And
all different ways too. Yeah.
And it really has an impact on your body and your voice. And I think from afar, it can look quite glamorous.
Yes, it can. And it probably can be. Like, there's that upper echelon of artists who, if they don't make themselves stupidly sick with drugs and drink, they can have a pretty healthy, cushy life on the road.
Right.
But on the level that I've done it that way, not with the drugs and the drink, but I've done it that way. And I've done it by myself in the car with the dog. I mean, I've done the whole gamut. And right now it's usually flying to somewhere else and renting a van and touring from there. I love being on the road.
Yeah.
I love being in new areas. I love going out for a walk, which I'm going to do as soon as we're done here in this beautiful rural Alberta. And I love the routine of it. Like I'm definitely somebody who thrives on routine, which is ironic because there is none really, unless you're on the road or maybe in a recording studio for a week long. I had it when I taught at UBC, and I had a regular schedule and a regular paycheck. I love that. But otherwise, the only time you get it is on the road. And I really thrive on that. I like to know the critical path from the show time start and what I need to do to be ready to go and not be in a hurry and all of that stuff. I don't find it too hard physically, although I don't eat as well as I do at home. It's hard to get enough vegetables on the road. Harder. Take some real intention. I'm not great at specifically looking after my voice. And I don't say that proudly. Again, I'm not setting myself as an example, except a bad.
Do you have any sort of routine around your voice and performance?
No, I don't, and I know I
it's
should.
What it is.
Well, and I think that I'm coming around to needing that again because I'm not playing a wind instrument that keeps me sort of trained to sing from farther down. I find myself wishing that I had a few more tricks if my voice starts to get tired during a show. I will say that the one thing that I've had to stop doing is hanging out with the crowd in any way in between sets, because talking, or even after a show, if I've got a string of shows, because talking in a loud room is the worst. You think you're talking like we're talking here, but really you're yelling the entire time. So I've had to just bow out of those, unfortunately.
Yep.
I try and build days off.
That is great self-care, actually.
Yeah, and it's hard to do because it's fun and you want to be, you want to be engaging, but, or sometimes if I can't actually get away, I'll go to some corner and I'll say to the person I love to keep talking to, can we go over here where it's quieter? And just sort of control what's happening to me a bit better than just thinking.
The other thing I tell students to do when they're prepping to go on the road and be in that situation night after night after night is be a much better listener.
Oh,
so
that's good.
Ask a question and let them talk. Because really what your audience, I think a lot of the time what they want is for you to know them. That's like so exciting if you get to know them. So if you can limit your talking to asking them a question and then letting them do the loud talking, it's easier on your voice.
Very smart. Yeah. It's funny. Just as we're talking now, I'm getting croaky. Why is that?
Power of suggestion. Well, if you ever want a few warm-ups, we can talk about it.
I was just going to say that. Yes.
Yeah,
I should get some hints. It's time for me to take, because I want to be able, the only thing that's going to keep me from or make me stop is if something happens to my voice or not even necessarily my hands, because I could use accompanists. Yeah. Or my brain.
Yeah.
Those are the three things. So I have control over two of those.
You've collaborated with a lot of artists over the years, and that had to come from a place of like community, and you've spoken to it a bit today, community and mutual respect and support, as opposed to competition. And this is one of the questions that I tend to ask most of the guests that come on the show. And that has to do with the fact that I think the music industry is perceived to be a very competitive industry. And in some ways it is. And like almost without fail, everybody that I have on the show talks about the fact that their actual experience is one that is so much more like community based and respect and support based within the musical community. So do you want to just speak to that and around how we can continue to foster a supportive community in the music world?
That's very interesting. I definitely have come at it, especially with having done Songbird North and Bluebird North for so many years. I love, and I present shows for friends on Bowen, friends who are on tour, and they can come have a sleepover because the theater's right behind my house, and it's not my theater, but because I love to give back to the community. Even though that's not an artist who has presented me, there are many people out there who have presented me, and I'm so grateful to them. So it's my way of giving back. So I have always felt that without trying. I've always felt this sense of, especially now, I think as I'm older, I really want to do this as much as possible. But I have never felt a sense of competition, although there's no doubt that when, especially if somebody's up and coming, or, I'm very judgmental about who should have opportunities and who shouldn't. So maybe it should be defined as competitive. But I feel like when I think of being competitive, I think of wanting something over somebody else getting it. And I keep rolling back to, I know that for instance, with a festival, they have so many considerations. They have, sexual balance. They have diversity. They have how much budget they've got, the people who demand too much. I mean, there's just so many things that they're trying to balance. So if I don't make the cut, I don't think, oh, I guess I'm not good enough. But I might see somebody who I actually don't think is very good, but there's a lot of buzz about them for some reason. I might feel a little, but it doesn't take me anywhere. So just let it go. But I have found that the music community, and maybe it has been more increasingly that way, I think, since everything is so much more sort of organic, and people are recording their own albums, and everybody's doing things very independently. But there are also organizations that create that community that are helpful. I think that's all I have to say on that subject.
Okay, very good.
But I would love to be the person who got to determine who got all the opportunities. I wouldn't necessarily always be me, but if I want to be that person, I do find that there's an element sometimes of, this is going to sound really, maybe I shouldn't even say it. Sometimes I feel, as soon as you say that, you know that you're obligated to say it. That sometimes audiences can be a little cheap sometimes. And so if somebody's really bombastic or really big in their presentation or loud or harsh or holds a note for 3 minutes, they just, and that doesn't do it for me. I really like authenticity. I like to see an artist who is being who they are authentically and not trying so hard. And I think a lot of them will grow into that, and some of them won't. I don't know. And there's a market for everything. That's the other thing.
That's
Apparently,
true.
I should not be the judge, because I do have my taste, and my taste is not the same as everybody's. So I'm going to let go of that idea.
Is there anything you see that is often missed or misunderstood by artists or writers in the great Wild West of the music community?
I don't think so. I think audiences are very sophisticated now in their. I do think that they're hungry for authenticity, and they like to be comfortable. They like to laugh. They like to hear stories that reflect their stories. And I think they're very forgiving in that they don't demand somebody be a big dramatic performer. They're very giving and supportive of people who are perhaps more shy or more vulnerable. I think that's fantastic. And the second half of the question was
missed or misunderstood by artists or writers.
I don't think so. I mean, I do keep winding back to wanting artists to not take themselves so seriously as being the most important part of the equation, and partly for their own peace of mind, because it's way more fun when you see yourself in a healthy perspective. But we are in a strange business where to get up on stage and feel worthy of having that focus from an audience, somebody who's wildly successful is just as insecure as you are, but the world is treating them like this. And I think I call it, for myself, I call it the Kurt Cobain syndrome, where the disparity between how they're being treated and idolized compared to how they feel internally is a chasm that can be a pit to fall into. And so I think that the soft version of that can be how disorienting it can be to take your precious songs and this music that you love and want to share and get on a stage where it's almost impossible not to have these voices going, because all these people are watching you, and so sort of this perfect storm of sense of self-worth and sense of value and all of that stuff. So it can be really confusing and hard on people. And it's actually you're just making me realize maybe that's part of what I can contribute at this point in my life, is to help people kind of take this person that when they're sitting in their room writing their song and feeling that sense of comfort, that they can learn to take that onto the stage and shut up the noisy voices.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's never perfect. You never completely shut them out for sure. But my feeling when I get on stage now is I'm just so happy.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be there.
Yeah.
And that's the overriding sensation. I like seeing people's faces. I don't want it to be just dark and me and the lights. I want to see their faces. I don't care if they're falling asleep. I understand. I fall asleep in the audience too. But I want to see them. I want to have that energy be. I hate to sound hippy dippy, but I find like raked seating where there's sort of a wall of people in front of you. Those are the best shows, and I feel like it's because you're putting this energy out, and it's like a wall, like the waves and the surf, and it comes right back to you. So it can be when you get to that place where you're free of all those negative voices and feel really confident in what you're giving. And the value of the music that you're sharing, and that's the value. It's not you're not so great. It's this thing that isn't between you that you're sharing, and that you're all saying, oh, this music amazing. I just love that so much.
I think that's fascinating that you like to see the people in the audience.
To me, Barney and Tom don't really like to.
Yeah, I mean, I love being on stage. There's no place in the world that feels so much like home to me as being on stage. That's the only way I can describe it. Is it like it feels everything in the world feels right when I'm on stage. Right. But I like knowing there's lots of audience out there, but I like them on the other side of the lights. So I like a sense of the people, but I don't get nervous if that's the setup. But if it's a small group of people in a well-lit room and I can see all of them, I fucking hate it. It'll make me just want to throw up. And especially if I know them, that's the worst. Like if it's a performance situation and it's a group of people and I can see them all and I know them and they're fucking musicians.
That I can definitely get a lot of this when I know that there's musicians. Yeah. Okay, so yesterday we played chatter. We played basically a house concert, but it's a purpose-built home that a musician here who built my violin, actually, Chris Sandvoss, built specifically to have concerts. And it's like a cathedral. It's just so beautiful. He can fit about 113 people in there. So they're packed in, but it was a matinee, and there's windows. It was very bright for the audience and for us. Yeah. And I loved it so much. I thought, this is my favorite thing in the world, which is your least favorite thing in the world. And I didn't actually, Barn knew a lot of people in the audience. I didn't, but I did know that this is a family of phenomenal musicians. So when I was playing my violin, I was self-conscious. That part was, oh God, every time. I don't know. Anyway.
There is a thing about playing in front of other musicians because I think that we know what we do. We know how we judge other musicians. Yeah. And therefore we expect that they are doing the same to us, and they probably are.
I think somehow.
That's to me, that's why it's so nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think I've just made such good friends with my limitations. And knowing that I am not a world-class player in terms of an actual skill on my instrument. So I'm okay with that now. So it's but on the violin is different because I want to be better on the violin, and I know I could be better on the violin. Yeah. So there is some self-consciousness there. It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, I do find that the whole thing of performing it's just not something people normally do. I mean, there's public speaking. If I'm doing public speaking, that's nerve-wracking. I find that nerve-wracking, but not music.
There's been a huge shift for me in terms of speaking over the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so, where it used to be the thing that made me want to vomit more than anything else in the entire world. Like public speaking was just the worst thing I could imagine. And I don't know. I've done a fair bit of teaching over the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, maybe in different sort of classroom situations where I've had to be in front of a group of people. And yes, it was a subject where I knew what I was talking about, but it is a form of public speaking. And my relationship with it has completely done a 180. And now I actually love it. Which cool. I never expected, ever did I expect
great?
it.
Well, that's very inspirational, because we think that whatever we feel or whatever we feel limited by is always going to be thus. But it's not true. Yeah. We do change. We do evolve.
So, especially being someone who plays so many different things and sings and you worked with a lot of people, what's the most unexpected way you've used your talents in the course of your career?
I know I'm going to come up with the perfect answer after we finish. I guess in theater, singing and dancing, and in Tapestry. Tapestry didn't have dialogue, but there was a lot of choreography. Oh, well, there have been many offshoots.
Yep.
And this might seem, I mean, this is just such a big subject, but I got very involved in the restorative justice movement. Mm-hmm. Having been a victim of crime, a victim of a sexual assault and stabbing, when I was sort of in some ways at a peak in terms of public notoriety, and I did not want to be quiet about it. One paper reported that I had been injured, and another one had reported that an unnamed woman had been raped and stabbed. And this is on Salt Spring Island, right? So I knew that the public would put it together, but in those days they did not publish the names of rape victims. And I felt that this was not my shame, and I felt that it was important for women to know that it was not. I was not targeted. It wasn't. He didn't know who I was, and I wanted women to be more aware than I was, and because there were moments where I could have listened to my instincts and didn't. Anyway, I wanted to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I was honest and shared that, and I have always talked about it when it was appropriate. I didn't think today was, but it turns out it is.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. So I was asked several times to talk at judicial conferences, because I would imagine at that time it was harder to hear from the perspective of victims, and I became a huge. Restorative justice was just one of the things that was coming to the fore in that era. But I felt really honored to be able to talk to judges about what my experience had been with the judicial system. And the most profound part of that was that when 3 years later, when he was finally arrested and convicted, I was in the courtroom when he was sentenced. And the judge said, do you have anything you'd like to say? And he said, I'd like to apologize to the victim. And he said, I don't think that's appropriate. He said, I don't even know she's here. I don't think that's appropriate. Where I felt even then, yes, he should be able to do that. I mean, I was far more interested in him being healed, and so we wouldn't do it to anyone else, than I was about just incarcerating them. So that was a really key moment where I felt like, okay, if I can help the judicial system understand the importance of allowing for there to be some compassion going each way, some understanding, some communication, then I'm going to do that. So that was all very unexpected in answer to your question. And it wouldn't have happened, I don't think, if I hadn't been a public person.
Yeah.
And
well, and I just want to say, I know this doesn't actually have anything to do with my question, but what you were just talking about in terms of that you were far more interested in him being healed than than other. Not everybody has that reaction, right? But the song that you wrote about it, right? I'm not the one, I'm assuming about that experience.
Yeah.
And that always, that perspective always came across to me in that song, that it was not punitive. It was about your experience, but it was also like it was very clear that you expressed compassion for him as well, which I thought was a pretty amazing place to come from, frankly.
Yeah, I don't know quite why I did, or why I do, but that was my instinct. I mean, at the time, he was a 16-year-old kid, so that probably played into it. And I could tell how vulnerable he was, and I survived it by talking to him, like in a way that you would not expect in that situation, because I needed to humanize myself for him. And I felt after the fact that he deserved the same, that he was clearly a really screwed up kid. I'd actually have never used the word healed before. Usually I say I wanted him to get fixed. I mean, I wanted him to be in a rehabilitative kind of scenario, not just incarcerated, because it doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
However, it's my understanding that he has had no interaction with the law since he was released 12 years later. So that's good.
That is a very positive thing. Yeah.
So other than that,
anything else? Yeah. Go ahead. Other than that, go ahead.
It would be and writing, when we did the Baby Boomer Blues play, I did a lot of the writing and rewriting and delivering monologues, which are really painful for me because I'm not great at memorizing. Like, that is stressful for me. But a kind of theatrical experience that I hadn't done before and wouldn't have otherwise pursued. And it's one of the things I love about music, especially if you do have some notoriety, then people, I mean, I don't think of it as being exploited or used, but they will invite you or want to have you a part of something that they're doing so that it raises some awareness about it. And I find that very, it's an honor. And sometimes it'll be experiences and interactions with people that I wouldn't have had otherwise. But after, when I'm lying in bed tonight, I'm going to think of the perfect answer for what you just asked me. Something truly outrageous.
Then we'll just have to do this again.
I guess
it's so much fun.
That would be fine with me. So much fun. And I see you so rarely. It's crazy to just be on the screen. Yeah. I think the last time was when I came to I think we were doing a show at one of the casinos, and you were doing a show in another room with Saf. And I remember coming to see the band. And I can't remember the name of the band, but
did I even know that you were there? It was probably the ticket.
Did.
That was our band.
Oh, you probably did, but it was a very long time ago. We weren't.
Oh, it was probably that might have been just like our opening night, but that was a while ago because we haven't played in a while. But I think I saw you more recently at our dear friend's wedding in Harrison.
Oh, yes. Jessica's wedding. Right.
Yes.
I'd forgotten about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was the last time I saw you. Is there anything else you think is really important for up and coming artists to know that we haven't touched on today?
I guess just a sort of blanket advice that if you are drawn to be a musical artist, that you do it because of how much you love music and not because you want fame. I think that's a much riskier road. and fraught with, I think that the psychological things that make one crave fame need to be fully analyzed first before you embark on a road that's your main impetus. I think too that if you are always doing it because of how much you love music, you can do it as long as you like. One more thing that I only discovered recently about singing. I, first of all, learned a fair bit ago that although this comes to me naturally, to sing lyrics, really thinking about what I'm singing so that it's expressed in my face. And that I think makes it more interesting for an audience, especially if you're a solo artist and there's nothing else going on. But also because I think the words are really important. So when we talk, we use our facial expressions, but people don't often when they sing. So that's something I always do. But more recently, the epiphany was that if I really concentrate on the meaning of the lyrics that I'm singing, like with this Zen-like focus, that the singing completely takes care of itself. I don't have to focus so hard on making sure I hit that note or that I do an interesting phrase, or that's not where my consciousness is. And it just takes care of itself. I do sing more interesting phrases. I don't croak. I'm not tightening up because I'm not worried about that. I'm just focusing on the message that I'm delivering, because that's what we're doing. We're communicating. We're not just performing. We're communicating.
Yeah.
So, that's the last little bit I wanted to leave you with.
I love that.
I thought you would.
Where can people find you, Shari? Web, social media, upcoming shows, any of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, upcoming shows are easiest found on my website, and which is shariulrich.com. It's a great website that Julia built. All the good things Julia built. And then
I've spent some time on there the last few days, and it is a great site.
Oh, yay. Yeah, very, very functional. I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram and all of those things. I don't post a lot. I'd rather go for a walk. But I do post. And of course, the music is that I can, if anybody wants to actually purchase CDs from me, they're all on the website. And of course, I'm on all the usual platforms.
Excellent. Well, I will link all of those things in the show notes. And I just so very much appreciate you being on with me today. It's so much fun to hang out with you. And it is. And
we'll have to do it face to face one of these times.
Absolutely, we will.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks for doing this. It was really a pleasure. Truly.
Well, I've had so much fun today. Thank you, Shari.
Good. Okay. Someday we'll do it from my actual bedroom next time with a ring light.
Oh, hey.
I'm actually much healthier than this gray pallor conveys.